I'm from upstate New York. I graduated from Williams College in 2020 in Massachusetts. So I could- Oh, near Albany area. I wouldn't know for now. And so I did 2 gap years. Hi, I'm Kasturi. I'm from Houston. I graduated in 2018 from Johns Hopkins, and then I graduated in 2021 from Brown with my master's. Yeah, before that. Hi, everyone. My name is Therese. I went to Emory for undergrad. I studied chemistry in Stanford while I was there. Graduated in 2020, so I took 2 years off.
Hi, Ellen Catherine. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2020 from UCLA. And now I'm here.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to introduce yourselves. I am just gonna hit you with one question to kind of jumpstart us into a formal conversation about your experiences taking gap years. So the first thing I'd like to ask y'all is why you decided to take a gap year.
You want us to like go down the line?
Oh,
You can
yeah.
go-
So I plan on taking 1 gap year. I did not plan on taking 2 gap years. And so part of that decision was I wanted to really, when I was applying for gap year jobs, I was actually applying to Emory. I worked here. There are a lot of positions for not taking like 1 student to do research for 1 year. So I thought I would have greater research output if I did 2 years. But I was not ready to apply for interns like extracurriculars and like research experience, clinical experience, without taking gap years. And like full disclosure, I was just not ready. I was also not planning on taking 2 gap years. I was only planning on taking 1. But then because of the pandemic, I ended up pushing my MCAT back like 4 times. And so I would not have like gotten my score back in time to like make the decision to apply. So then I didn't. And then I ended up taking 2 years because I pushed my MCAT back so much. But then it gave me the opportunity to work in a clinical setting, which was actually beneficial to me. Because even though I felt like my application was ready, it was still good because I didn't have that much clinical experience. So then I did get to work for a full year in a clinical setting, which was very helpful.
So unfortunately, graduate college was a struggle for me. So when I finally like graduated, I didn't know what was happening next. And med school, I was definitely not ready for that. So I needed those 4 years to like not only get myself well put together as a human being again, but also to like financially, I knew that I needed a job that would let me like take care of myself, but also like there was a financial component to it. And I also wanted to take some time to just explore things and choose if see if medicine was right for me. And so I tried to do as much as I could to really like hone in on that fact. So 4 gap years. So basically our pre-health advisor not forced us, but really encouraged us to take gap years. It was becoming the norm in medical schools that the average starting age is 24, I believe, across the board. So a lot of people are taking 2 gap years. So I kind of planned for that from the start. And then I interned at a pharmaceutical company after my junior year. I actually really enjoyed it, and so I appreciated taking those 2 years to explore that option fully to see if that's the direction I actually wanted to go inside of medical school. And also it's just a good time to take a break from school and just enjoy and experience adult life and get a better understanding of how the world works a bit.
I've always been bad at planning ahead, so it's not like I planned to take gap years. I didn't plan to do something else, so it sort of happened to me. And I think the point is that's okay. Like that can happen. As I said, I took 4 gap years, so I did a lot of weird stuff. I guess I can go into later, but my application was also pushed back by COVID because I was going to take it in 2020, and then I was going to take it, I think, like April 2020. That became not possible, so I just switched. So, yeah, if things can push things back, and hey, then you can still make it place. But also, I just wasn't ready out of college. No way. Application was not strong enough, and also I was just not emotional. It's not, so yeah.
That's fair.
Sam.
Thanks, Safo. I switched tracks halfway through undergrad. I went to University of Washington. I was pre-BA. I was feeling pretty strong about that. But then my junior and senior year, I had a real change of heart. I was working in clinics. I was like, I want to apply to medical school. So my first gap year, I went to a local community college and did a DIY postdoc. Essentially, it just means you choose the classes. So I had to redo like the biochem series, OChem series. I took an MCAT prep course. I don't regret a thing about it. It was great. And then the second year as well, I did like this volunteer opportunity where I got to move to California for a little bit. Like Natalie was saying, just experience adult life. It was really rewarding for me.
Like a lot of people, I also plan to take one gap year, and I was in the 4+1 cancer bio program here. So it's a master's that you start your senior year, and then I think I started it into COVID. So we graduated when COVID started. So I ended up finding out that like lab is like a lot of work, especially when you're working on the thesis. My lab was pretty dysfunctional. So I just decided like I couldn't juggle lab and thesis with applying. I decided to take the 4+1 and initially do 1 year because I just didn't feel confident in terms of my the ladybug. I was like, I didn't feel confident as like a science student. Like like my grades were fine. I thought it would be good to do a master's. So I did that. And then I did a year. I needed like another gap year to apply. So I went to the NIH through the postbac program. So it's very much like a research fellowship. You're supposed to have your own projects. But it's very supervised and it's a really great place, I think, to train and just grow. And there's a lot of emphasis on, I think, professional development and mentorship. It's amazing. Okay. And I was in the surgical oncology department there. So if anyone's interested in that program, it's a 1 to 3 year program. Very flexible.
And then another thing that we wanted to ask was like, how did you guys choose to be in gap year, or if like, you know, it wasn't like a choice specifically, just how did you go with that?
How did I choose? The 4+1 kind of fell into my lap. I did like clinical cancer research here, like my sophomore year, but I realized like I had no idea about like the pathophysiology or like the disease, like development at the cellular level. And I got to, I think the cancer bio undergrad class might still be offered. And I realized that I couldn't read a scientific paper. And it was really hard for me. So, and it was my last attempt to kind of like try wet lab because the program starts your senior year. So that's why I chose that. And then I chose the NIH postdoc program because I just had a friend that I saw on LinkedIn was in it. And so I just matched with her and she was an Emory grad as well. Now she's at Cleveland Clinic for med school and she kind of helped me out and I applied and that was kind of the end of it. I just got some interview invites, but you can also cold email PIs at the NIH.
Cool. Like I said, I was doing that postdoc. At the same time, I was continuing my job as a medical scribe in the emergency department. And because of COVID, I actually got hired as a clinical lab tech at my university hospital. So basically there's so many COVID samples coming in, they need help processing it all. So they're hiring a lot of new grads. So that was a really cool experience to learn like what people in the lab do. There's kind of like this funny like power dynamic between the healthcare providers and the lab. Like whenever the lab calls, all the nurses and doctors like, oh, not the lab, like what are they calling us for? So it's cool like getting to learn what people in the lab are actually doing behind the scenes. And for my second year, I just knew I wanted to do something non-healthcare related and just like learn and grow and just try new things. So I was an AmeriCorps volunteer through this program called City Year. Basically, I was a teaching assistant at a local public school. And yeah, it was a great time just exploring a new city, discovering more things about myself. Yeah, that was the reason why I stopped.
Yeah, as I said, I'm bad at planning. So I graduated in 2018 and then I wasn't sure exactly what to do. So I volunteered at a hospice, which was awesome and super fun. But I also worked at Kohl's. So just like weird stuff. And then that was in the fall. And then in the spring, I went back and took a biochem class in college. Like I guess it'd be post-bac work technically. After that, I had it figured out. So I went to clinical research, did that for over 2.5 years at Metro Hospital in Boston. So that was, my thought there was that You know, if you wanna go into medicine, you see a lot of you see patients all the time and clinical research can give you an opportunity to actually do that and get to know patients over a long period of time and get to form these relationships really important. But also it was a great opportunity to see something that wasn't strictly speaking medicine, so you could get an idea of sort of as Sam said and everything, you see this larger system within healthcare and how it all intertwines. So I thought that was really cool. and informative.
So as I mentioned before, I interned at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals after my junior year. It's based in, well, the manufacturing facility is based in upstate New York, near Albany, around where I'm from. So it's super convenient that I could live at home and work there. And I just really enjoyed the experience. It was very fast paced. I did a pretty intense project in 10 weeks. I was in the quality control virology department at the time. And then I just really loved the people that I was with, the company, what their values were. And so at the end of the summer, I was offered a position to come on full time after I graduated. And I was considering looking around at biotech companies in Boston, just to get away a bit and get away from home a bit and to explore other companies in the same sphere of pharma and biotech, but ultimately just decided to live at home for the 2 years and save money before med school. And I really liked the company, so I was put in the QC biochemistry group, and which ended up being a really good fit. I did my degree in both chemistry and French, and so I really liked the more biochemistry side of that. And just really like people that I worked with and got to be in the lab a bit more, which was fun, I think, for those 2 years. I don't know if I want to be in a wet lab again, but I really liked it at the time. I described my job to people as like I got to play with instruments and toys all day. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
So my journey to what I ended up doing for 3 of the 4 years started like the summer after my freshman year. I just ended up finding like an internship in medical writing. I really do like writing and I like medicine, kind of that's one of your thing. But like I continued to do that throughout college, sort of, and then when I graduated, I needed a job and I wanted to move to New York City, and like that was basically the driving factor. Like I wanted to live my best friend's life. And I knew that it was there, and that was one of the jobs I got was in medical writing, and my path through medical writing has been pretty crazy. I started off mostly in like publications and all that, but over time I realized that I really like the regulatory side of writing, so interfacing with the FDA and like the FDA equivalent in other countries, and what's so cool about it is if you don't mind writing, and writing not in the sense of like fictional writing or anything like that, like very structured, logical, progressive writing, and you like what medicine is, like the content, there's not a lot of people who intersect there. So the pay is phenomenal and there's a lot of opportunities. There are so few people who do this. I ended up working in that for 3 years, and by the end, I mean, it's just fascinating and you get to do so many different things. I ended up in vascular surgery research mostly as a medical writer. And that was really cool. You get a lot of publications because you're writing them, so they'll put your name on it, which is also great. So yeah, that's how I ended up there.
My first year was like right after COVID, so I graduated from COVID time. And I went home, which was not planned. I was planning on staying in Atlanta and working in the clinical setting for 3 years. But after I had to go home, I ended up staying with my family for 1 year. And during that year, I was studying for the MCAT, and I worked at FedEx as a package handler for a few months. And then I worked at McDonald's for a few months. It was an interesting time. Working as a package handler, I worked like a really early morning shift. So I'd like go in when it was like pitch black and like work until the sun like rose, pushing packages on a conveyor belt. It was an essential worker job, so I got to be out and about. And then I worked at McDonald's because I left the FedEx job because it was terrible.
Like, we had managers who were adults who acted like children, and that's like one of my biggest pet peeves, where if someone's older than me and they act like a child, I just can't work with you. Like, I can't be more mature than my boss, like, I can't. So I left that job, and then I was just sitting for the MCAT, but then I was like, I can't really like study if I don't have structure in my morning, because I'm not a morning person, I like to study in the afternoon. And so I was gonna do something in my morning, or I'm just not gonna do anything. So then I was like, oh, work at McDonald's. Which was also an interesting time. I will never work in food again. That's all I'll say. But I did discover hot mustard, which is a great sauce that not many people know about. But yeah, that was an interesting time. So then after that, after I took my MCAT, I was like, I'm getting ready to apply, and I still feel like I need clinical experience, so I started looking for work. As a medical assistant, and actually through the PHA's like blog, I found an opportunity at a dermatology office out in Sandy Springs. And so I worked there for a year full time, and it was pretty great to kind of like explore a different field of medicine that I was like not interested in at all, like the skin. Not interested in the skin. So I was like, it's pretty cool that I got to see like how different doctors who were trained at different times at different schools, like work together on a team, got to work with advanced practice practitioners. That also did a lot of front work, so like writing up labs, calling in labs, calling in prescriptions, sending the prescriptions, cleaning instruments. So we did like 4 jobs in this one job. Taught me that I don't want to be dermatology, which I like knew beforehand, like to like really cement it. But then it was also helpful to my application, because that was where I was lacking the most of the clinical experience. So, yeah, and then I got to live on my own in Atlanta, which was awesome. Because I got to like go places that I didn't go when I was an undergrad. So, yeah. But when you like come out or gap year, or would you be nervous?
So I'm from Atlanta originally. I finished high school here and I like went to California and came back. So I always knew I wanted to work. I wanted to come home. California's really expensive. Yeah. I was just very intrigued by Emory. And I really had like really strong research. So I was just like indiscriminately, full disclosure, I like graduated from college and I was like unemployed. I was like living at my parents' house and I was like having this whole crisis of like, what am I doing with myself? And so I was like indiscriminately like applying to positions at Emory in like their research thing. And then I was like interviewed for a couple of positions, and then I really just I agreed to work in a lab that like I could see myself contributing in a meaningful way, and it seemed like I got along with the PI, and like the research was cool. So that's how I got that job. And then I was also working as an MA for at the same time, and how that happened with an act of nepotism. It was kind of where my mom worked, and so I was like, I need clinical hours, and so I was like volunteering there for a while. Then after like 2 weeks of volunteering, the physician who was in charge of this primary care clinic was like, "Oh, you're on payroll," and I was like, "All right, I'm on payroll." But I think that was really at the time I was kind of resentful. I was like, "Oh, like I already have this job. Like I want time for myself and to like work on my application and things that I really want this job." But I think that was also really meaningful to me because it was a primarily like Mandarin speaking clinic, and so it contributed a lot to my application to be like, well, I like took the Asian American Studies classes when I was in college, and now I can really like apply what I learned in those classes to a real environment, and then it's like connected to my background, and like so those things are important to me. I'm glad I did it, even if I didn't sign up for it at the time. But it was like an accident. I didn't plan for that.
Use your connection.
Be like aggressive with you. Like, not with those people, but use them, yeah. Like that's how I'm here, 100%.
Yeah, don't feel bad. It's like
Don't.
you have to do what you have to do. That's your
Oh, like, for example, this is actually a good one. I worked at a daycare my freshman year of college, and one of the parents of the daycare was a physician, and she actually studied here at Emory. So she became, for me, having a daycare job, not even healthcare related, I got to meet lots of different people. I met her. She introduced the idea of going to Emory to myself, and now I'm here, which is really awesome. So it just goes to show, like, during undergrad, I highly encourage you all to like And after undergrad too, just do things that, you know, make you happy. I love that daycare job. I love working with 6 to 18-month-old babies. It's one of like the best things for me. That's not for you, that's okay. But, you know, you can find connections and meet interesting people anywhere. And honestly, that's also gonna introduce you to the types of people who will one day be your patients. So absolutely diversify your experiences, do what feels authentic to yourself.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
I totally agree with like diversifying your experiences part, like do things that you're interested in, not because you think they'll look good on your application. But also don't panic if you don't have like family in medicine or something. This, like when I got this job, this was during COVID, so it's very difficult to get clinical experience. I really hope it's not so bad for you also, like if you're the first person in your family who's like interested in medicine, like you're gonna be okay, like you'll be fine.
I was the first person, I'm the first person in my family to go to med school, so I had no connection to anyone. And, like any clinical, that's why my clinical experience is so like low, because I knew any doctor.
Yeah,
There's like no doctor in my family that I could like get like a job with, so I had to do it family up.
and you'll be okay.
So you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
So, yeah, and also to that point as well, if you're like here in your agreement and you're thinking I have to do biochem or physics, don't do it. Unless you actually like chemistry. I like chemistry because I studied chemistry. I'm crazy. You know, like, I actually enjoy organic chemistry. That's not normal. So like, don't be like, I'm just gonna suffer through like the ABC, like bio major, like crap and like do this ecology class that I don't wanna do. They'll know if you don't like it because the way you speak about it during your interview, like, yeah, I was a bio major, they'll be like, where's the passion? So do what you want, like, you can major in anything, like, there are people who majored in like film and dance.
It's a third of our class.
Like, yeah, like, so many people like big humanities and like you get your pre like requisites done.
Okay, you still have to take a pre-test.
That's all you need to do. That's the only science you have to touch, and that's all you need. So. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing your experience.
I got it.
We have a
Question.
question. Oh, okay.
So the only clinical experience I really had was being the janitor at Pipette's private practice, and we are absolutely not doing nepotism, so I kind of. No, I'm not even kidding, it's
Yeah.
horrible, it's gotta stop, we're not doing it, so I was wondering how, here, I might try to get some clinical experience, like in the university setting, how would I go about doing something like that? Do I just cold email, cause that's how I got in touch?
I'm creative.
Fair enough.
I volunteered at Wesley Woods, the geriatric residential center on campus. I was tech rep or tech something. I literally helped the old people with like, I don't know how to send a photo of this flower I took in the garden to my grandpa. That's literally what I did. And if they didn't need help with that, I literally just sat there and they would be like, this is my grandson. And I'm like, this is my life story. And so kind of how I wrote about it on my application, because that was like a 3-year experience. I was like, the social aspect of geriatric medicine is just as important as like the declining health older people experience at the age. And so I basically was like, I played a key role in like the social aspect of geriatric health. A lot of older people feel really lonely and like maybe their family doesn't live here and they're like just like in this home because they live here. And like, so like you kind of have to get creative because I worked that in my application. I was like, I work in the social side of health, like.
Well, Emory loves it, like Emory
Yeah.
specifically, the Emory School of Medicine absolutely loves that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like for other places, but for Emory, I think just generally, it's not, I mean, clinical experiences are great because you get to know, oh, here's what a doctor does, here's what the med team looks like, that's great. But it's more about just getting to know people and getting experiences with people, because that's how, if you can speak passionately to people who you met, people who you worked with, and how that changed your outlook on things, or just how that impacted you, that's what they are really looking for, because doctors have to, or at least most doctors have to like people and actually get talking to them. And if you can demonstrate that passion,
Yeah, that's important.
go on.
And plus, like, you learn everything you need to know to be a doctor. That's where you're going to.
Yeah.
You will learn the pro cycle so many times. It's once. And honestly, I don't think you need to have a ton of clinical experience. Like, I didn't. I would say that was the weakest part of my application. I tried to make it happen by shadowing, by just getting exposed to the field. I volunteered as a COVID vaccination assistant,
in 2020, and then I also did some volunteering in the ER at the hospital near me, and like, that's the only clinical experience I have. And I think that you can make your application stand out in other ways, and it doesn't necessarily have to be your clinical experience.
I also want to say at Emory, so I did winship volunteering. I will say, like, I definitely talk to patients sometimes, but maybe like the MA like helped me take titles once, like just for fun. But like I was helping with a lot of administrative stuff, and unfortunately that is the reality. And I'm sure you all know about like the different like places to volunteer at Emory, like CHOA. As far as shadowing, I don't, you might want to talk to PHA, but when I didn't like know physicians, so I cold emailed like a bunch of oncologists at Winship, and I got in, but I did have to go through the offices of observership, which is really whack because you have to pay back to then, I paid $150 for a badge. Now, I intend to like, as a med student now, like try to figure out a way to, I think, at least for Emory undergrads, not pay that fee because it's meant more for like, let's say international medical graduates that are shadowing. I think sometimes the doctors can just like plug you in because Emory University and Emory Healthcare are separate entities. So I'm happy to talk about that later if anyone wants to connect about it. But I think like physicians here are very receptive to it. I hope that like none of you experience the cost prohibitive part of it in terms of like the badge. But definitely just try cold emailing. You'll probably not get a lot of responses, but hopefully someone does. And then I would say, yeah, use the clinics. And I think a lot of your application, like even if you're not always doing clinical stuff, like touching patients, talking to patients, it's more about how you write about the experience. So like, yeah, it's about your reflection, and you'll see that when you apply a POMIT or AMCAP. It's a lot about like the reflection and what you learned as opposed to like what you physically did.
Yeah. Also, if you have a lot of non-clinical experiences, they're helpful as well when you're writing your application. It could be like I spent a huge chunk of my time like working as like an administrative assistant for this office, and it was great. But it also helped me realize I do want to do medicine because I don't want to work in an office. So like that is also helpful as well.
Yeah. So I know like if you mentioned how like you had planned to take one gap year, and I guess that's kind of where I'm at right now, but I was curious, I guess at what time point you made the switch, if you ended up applying, like with the intention of having one gap year, you don't have to answer that, like that's too forward of a question, but I guess how you made the switch from one gap year to 2 gap years or like some more gap years versus less.
Just for your peace of mind, I had started my application already. I written my personal statement. I had started applying before I realized I was taking 2 gap years, so I withdrew my application. I can't really recommend that you do this. I decided pretty late. It was really, I was at the point where I was interviewing for jobs, and a lot of people were like, can you commit to 2 years? And I was feeling like so many of these positions are asking for 2 years versus 1 year. And then that was the point where I was like, I either need to change my gap year plans and not take a research job, or I need to take another year. And so I was offered a position at a lab that I thought was intriguing. And so I had written my personal statement, and part of why I was in a position to take another year, so I was like really attached to that personal statement. I like worked hard on it. It was like not that good. Like I like learned so much during my 2 years that I did not regret like taking 2 years out of like the second. Because if you take 1 year, you have to work on your application during the first year. But when I took 2 years, I applied for like the entire year, and I think that was really good.
Yeah.
It's so good for your wellness, just to like live with an adult and take care of the things that you need to take care of. Because the med school cycle is really hard, but it must have been like June when of that time. Like the application opens in May. I had started applying. I withdrew in June. The reason why I don't recommend that is because they're considered a reapplicant at that point. I think it's like if you submit an application to a school or something, even if you don't fill out the secondary, a lot of small details we probably don't need to worry about right now, but decide before May, probably.
Decide before that.
Yeah.
I decided to take an extra year before the application was open. I was doing the PHA, like the deposit letter application. I was like in the middle of doing that. And I was also, like, my senior year of college, I was like doing like way too many things, like I was trying to study for the MCAT. I was also writing like a senior thesis at the same time. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, I'm gonna like do the thesis and study for the MCAT. The thesis was due like the 7th of April and my MCAT was scheduled for the 25th of April. I was putting it really close to the edge because you get your score back like a few days after the cycle opens. So I was like really pushing it. And I just remember, like, I was working on my thesis and I was just like, I like really want to do this research. And since I'm trying to study for the MCAT at the same time, I'm like so behind on the thesis. And so I was like, I need to make a choice, either I stop working on my thesis or I like focus on the MCAT and focus on the MCAT, or I push my MCAT back so I can get my research done. And so I decided to do that. And so when I decided to push my MCAT back, that is what made me do an extra year. So, yeah, that was a rough process though. Because the thesis started as an honors thesis, then because of COVID, I didn't write for like 3 weeks. So then I like wrote my thesis in 2 days, and then yeah, I know. Writing was like, so writing isn't to the standard to be like defended. So that I didn't even get to defend my thesis. So that ended up being like a senior thesis. My only like pet peeve about it, and it was annoying because it was like for my Spanish major, not related to medicine at all. And I pushed my MCAT back and like extended my like gap year by another year. So I could do this research. I don't intend to get like a PhD in Hispanic studies. I just was interested in like the topic and I wanted to like do research on it. And they didn't even let me defend. And they told me 2 hours before my defense. So it was a fun time. I was mad. I didn't talk to my thesis director for like half a year. And it wasn't even his fault. He just delivered the news. I was just like, I don't even want to look at you right now. But hey, I'm still here, so.
You made it.
Yeah, I'm all about it.
But I would also say that, so when you're like in college and obviously before that, your life just sort of happens to you, like you just, it's very orderly. It's like first you do middle school, high school, college. After that, it can get blurred because it's really up to you. Like you don't have to be anywhere, you know? So I think that that'd be for me and probably for other people. Things can get a little more messy where it can then 1 year can become 2, and it can be just because of variables out there in the world. That, I mean, obviously for a lot of us, it's like, well, the pandemic, you know, I mean, that obviously had a big impact. Hopefully that won't be at all relevant to you guys, but stuff happens and it just gets more complicated. So having a more loose timeline, while frustrating, can also just be helpful. Like if you fall and you're behind, you're gonna be fine. I mean, I'm 26, I'm sorry. There's somebody 32 in our class. So it's just like,
There are people who have like
Yeah.
whole like real careers
Yeah.
that are like financially secure.
yeah. Or people are married,
Yeah.
you know. 25.
25.
90% of our class took
So,
gap years. It's very normal.
Yeah, 93%.
93%.
I almost took a third gap year. I was loving my life. I was like, this is great. Let's do a third. That's okay.
Find a reason to defer.
I was not gonna lie, for a second, I was like, oh, am I actually about to start school again? But for me, during my second gap year was the best time to apply. I had the most time, I had the most support. I like actually organized everything that I needed to do. I also had a buddy who was applying at the same time, so we were writing our essays together. So just like everything lined up, I was like, okay, I feel like I have everything I need to apply right now. So like, don't rush yourself, take the time you need. Some people do have to apply, unfortunately, during like really hectic circumstances. But they also still get in, so it's just, you know, really what you make of it. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Some people have to apply twice
Yeah.
or more. I know people who got into med school who apply more. Yeah, I know one guy, I took the MCAT like 3 times, I think.
That's also bad.
Applied. Yeah, I know, but it was like after that, I quit. And then he got off the wait list.
Wow.
Not here, but yeah. It happens.
Yeah, don't ever feel like you're behind.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, for all the people who are like, they just graduated from college and are starting med school, that's 7% of our 148 person class. So that's like a very small percentage. So, and
like, don't feel like you're old, because I was like 24 years old to start med school, I'm like, grandma. Like, the senior class is 32, and I was like, never mind. So, yeah, don't ever feel like you're behind, and like, I know what it's like to be a pre-med at Emory, where people are like, I'm doing like 10 research positions, and I like overloaded my schedule to 21 credits. That's like such a small percentage of the people, but they speak the loudest. So, don't ever feel like you're behind, like, one of the biggest regrets from undergrad was doubling in bio and tech. Why did I do that? I didn't need to do that, but I did it because everybody else was doing it.
Yes.
Wait,
don't-
and Smith?
Well, like doubling in bio, like Gen Chem and like intro bio.
I was like, she has 3 majors.
Without it being, but no, yeah. Regrets. I should have done that. That's what the summer term is for. Use the summer if you can. You take it in the summer so you can have a relaxing time in college. And your grades aren't as important.
Wait, did you mean to say study for the MCAT during the summer?
No, take organic chemistry.
Well, I'm doing that.
So that you're like years, like, like, don't stress yourself out. Like, what's the point of being stressed so that you're like broken while you're in college?
I think it's just like-
You'll be stressed when you're in med school.
I also want to say, like, specifically about Emory, yeah, if you don't like research, don't do research. Like, plenty of people like get into med school without research, and it doesn't matter. Like, especially for me, like, I did a lot of like basic science towards the end. People don't ask you during your interviews, like the MDs, like clinical MDs, like they don't care. Like, so don't stress about it as long as, but if you're gonna do it, make sure you're excited about it. I would also say at Emory, yeah, there's a lot, like, I think I did a lot of research because I felt pressured. I liked it, but I also felt like I needed to do research because all the other pre-meds are doing research, and I got lucky because I liked it. But I would also say, just keep your blinders on. We've been told that in M1 year as well, like, do what is important to you. I think maybe I wasn't the strongest student, like grades wise, because I did a lot of like activities, extracurriculars at Emory that I really, really cared about. And actually the non-clinical things are what I got asked about. And like, I think what stood out in my activity sections and stuff like that. So definitely do like things that are important to you, even if you feel like maybe it doesn't fit with your theme. Like, we are all very diverse people and we do lots of different things. And it doesn't have to be medicine related. Like I certainly didn't have an application that was like all like medicine related, if that makes sense. And I think that that's a good thing.
Just like kind of add on that, I know when I was like a senior, I looked at my grades and I was like, oh my God, like this is not gonna go well. There are so many contingency plans, and if you guys ever, you wanted happy to like list out like A through Z of contingency plans, there's always a fix, like literally always a fix. So don't let anybody tell you you can't do medicine, because that is a full out lie. Really, like I never got to ask them questions like, you think like, oh, I got a C+ in this class. Like no interviewer was like, so I think in the fall semester of your second year, you took this course. You want to tell me what happened? They didn't ask about that. They were like, oh, you did orientation stuff for like 3 years. Tell me about that. Yeah.
I got stuck cold a lot.
So.
Like legit, they were just like, you worked at Kohl's, that's really cool. Like, I mean, yeah, like I got to see stuff I'd never seen before, and they liked it. Yeah, they're like, this guy's cool. Sorry.
No, and to add on to that, I think sometimes when like you hear that, you're like, well, I don't have to do like research, or I don't have to do like all of these like payment things, but I think there's also a narrative of like accomplishment or like leadership. I also had like no leadership coming in, and I like remember panicking. I would be like, oh, I have like no meaningful contribution to the world. All I did was like work in this lab and like work as an MA. I didn't like start a program or like, but in my interviews, I talked a lot about the things that I cared about, which is like creative writing, and I was like unpublished, like I was just like writing for fun, right? And so I got asked about that in every interview, and I wrote about it in my personal statement, despite not having like my name on anything. You'll be okay, like you don't have to. You have so much time ahead of you to like accomplish the things that you want to accomplish, and you're still allowed to do things because you care. I do think maybe I talk a little bit too much about writing. You should probably have a good answer for why you want to do medicine. Like have a good reason for why you're interested in medicine, and then be passionate about everything.
Yeah, now that we have like about 15 minutes left, we can just open it up to the audience if you guys have any questions, we can just keep the conversation going.
I have something, so for those of you who had either done like an MA position or a clinical coordinator position, that's also something that I might be looking forward to doing, my gap year, so I just wanted to get a little insight on like, how did you get that position, like what was the job application process, and yeah, all that.
I found the job opportunity that I, like, where I work through AJ blog, and I literally just like emailed the coordinator of the clinic. I worked for 2 weeks, and I studied this with Marie, and I like want to get some clinical experience. So that's where I work. They trained me to be like a dermatology technician, which is like an MA specific dermatology. You didn't have to have any experience. So I just like emailed her and then sent her a copy of my resume, which was terrible, you know? So that's how I got that position, and they like train you on the job, so. Yeah, I learned how to do a B12 job.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like, I did clinical research, right? And that, so I did it at National Hospital, a huge place, right? So there I just went on like the hospital website, like their like, jobs thing, and just looked at, the clinical research coordinator one, which fit what I wanted to do, and also it did require an experience. I didn't have any of that. So, that was just a blind, like, apply to 100 things, which is how it works with really big places, because it has to go through whole HR and everything. So yeah, really big places like that. That was the same, all the stuff in Boston, all the stuff in New York, all these big hospital systems. For smaller ones, for like a private practice, sure, sort of.
It's actually like, busy fields are always looking for jobs, so like derm practices are like always looking for like MAs, because there's really high turnover in those positions. Because most of the people who apply are like pre-PA, pre-med, so they're like trying to like see what a doctor or a PA in XYZ field does, and kind of get their hours if they're like applying to PA pool. Very important to have hours. So like it's very high turnover, and I like got people who went to Emory jobs at where I work. I was like, hey, what's up? Like they have jobs, I know them now, before they like try to post places. So I guess it's kind of like non.
It's not that
Right, makes sense. For me, I was a scribe through Scribe America, kind of basic, I know, but hey, it teaches so much for real. Like right now, we're doing like patient interviews, physicals, and I'm like, yes, honey, I know that. I can't. So definitely recommend that. Really cool. I was a nursing assistant for a year or two as well. But that being a nursing assistant is also like pretty rigorous, I would say. You also are supporting people through a challenging phase of their life. So if you aren't really drawn to like that hands-on patient care and supporting them through that time, I would recommend doing something a little bit less like strenuous emotionally and physically, but it was really rewarding. I talked about my patients a lot during my interviews and during my application. And then my clinical lab tech job, I found out through Handshake. I don't know if Emory has a Handshake, but I love Handshake. It was really good for University of Washington, and yeah, so just keep your eyes out on all the job boards. It's kind of like an obsession when you're like looking for jobs. You're kind of like shopping, like, oh, I'll apply to this one or this one, you know, you gotta apply to a lot before you catch one, honestly.
When you get that one, that's it, just go. Yeah, I guess one other thing that we wanted to ask was, like, I guess what was it like to jump in your gap year? And then you also spoke a little bit about this, but what was it like sort of jumping in your gap year along with like writing your secondary and student? Well, also an actual.
I will say that it was probably infinitely easier to work and to apply than to be and to apply. I could not imagine me just apply. I was working at Notify, and so I'd go home and, okay, there's no way to make the application cycle like better. It's just terrible. It will always be terrible. It's like so bad. You'll be all right. I went for the 9 to 5, so I come home at 5. I like eat dinner, mess around on the internet by like 8 p.m. and then like write my stuff. And so I think a huge part for me of working versus being a student was like the lack of real, like, once you're done for the day, you are done, you don't have to do homework. When you're a student, you have to do homework. So it wasn't, I would recommend it over being a student. I mean, maybe if you're like free for the summer, you can write secondaries, but then like school starts again, so.
I'd say like I took my MCAT during my first gap year and that was difficult because I was at home with my family. And so like finding time to study like in a Brown household. Like that was a challenge in and of itself. Like I'm like taking a practice exam and my mom's like, hey, did you like, she pops her head and she's like, hey, did you like see my slippers? And I'm like, mom, like I'm still on practice exam. And then like we were like, moving house while I was studying for the MCAT, so there would be times where I was like, I had to get like 3 weeks, like chapters in the book, and she'll be like, we have to get our house staged so we can get photos taken tomorrow. And I was like, what? So that was one challenge. But then when I was applying, I was working. So like the summer after like my MCAT, like I took it in April. That summer was when I like tried to write as many of my secondaries as I possibly could. A lot of like med schools, like they would ask the same things. So I just wrote a lot of like generic ones that I would like tailor to the school. So it would be like, why our school? Why medicine? Diversity, adversity. Name a difficult time. Have you ever had any leadership opportunities? How about a time when you did really good? So I like wrote a bunch of like generic things like that, and then I would be like, I'm interested in Boston University because
Free clicks.
change
Change the
well, because that's true, that's one thing, like if you do a bunch of generic ones, like sometimes I'll copy the one from like Tulane and like put it in like the everyone, and I'd be like, wait, Atlanta, like, you know, so that's the only like downside of that. As the summer wore on, I got tired, so then I was like writing more secondaries like as they came out, but try to get as much as like the generic writing done early, if you know you're gonna be busy during the application cycle, because that helps a lot. Just try not to get tired, but I was so tired that I kind of gave up halfway through the summer. But yeah, and then balancing interviews with my job. It was easy with them because they knew a lot of us were trying to like go to PA or med school, so they were like, when you have an interview, just like try to give us a chance to know this. So that we can like find someone to like replace you that day. But not every job will be like that, you know.
I could use that as a plug for medical writing. It's fully remote. I work 40 hours wherever the heck I wanted to, and they wouldn't know. I don't extend my keys free. All day, and then throw like all my other secondary study for exams, did what I needed to do. And that's really you get paid well and you just work remotely. I mean.
I did that a lot too, honestly. I got to do a lot of remote work.
Yeah.
It was great. Was it cheating? Yes. But
What they don't know.
no. It's on TV now.
Yeah.
I guess I'll throw in like while you're studying for the MCAT and applying, at least for the MCAT specifically, some advice someone gave me that was really helpful was like coming up with the schedule even before you start studying. Because when you start studying for the MCAT, you don't really know how to approach it. But I literally had like this Word document that, like, for example, okay, I have 10 weeks, like 10 rows, split up into 7 columns for the 7 days of the week. So I'm like, okay, Monday, I'm going to start studying biochem for 2 hours, and then I'm going to do practice problems for another hour. And I literally like would plan out like the hours and the class, the subject material I really needed help with. And even doing that, like, even though I really technically had no idea how I was going to study best for the MCAT, really led to my success later on, because when I was getting lost in the weeds and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I could refer back to that and see Sam, previous Sam, who's in her right state of mind, and then, oh, yes, I do need to do this. I do need to take this practice exam and X, Y, Z.
Kind of off of that, also do as many practice exams as you can, so you can get your time down. I was able to answer every question because I did many practice exams and I had like a timing system of how I was gonna get through the exam. Also endurance, because you have to work up to doing those 8 hours and plan your meals for the day. Lots of high protein, lots of fat. Right.
I never did a practice. No thanks.
What?
We don't do that.
I know. No, but this is the whole theme of not planning ahead. No. Well, I'm I'm a crazy person, but I like do what they did, cause yeah, I mean,
All the stories. Apparently you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Like,
get a job at like Kohl's or Marshall's and just.
We need that Kohl's cash, honestly.
Yeah, it's good, they have good salaries.
I studied for the MCAT while I was taking physics in the summer at UAlbany. I mean, it was like a summer course. It really, I was like, had a lot going on, but it was not the worst way to do it. I tried to push my job back, because I took it after I graduated, and I studied over the summer. And tried to push my job back as far as I could. I asked, like, what's the latest day you'll let me start? Which was in August, and I took the MCAT in September. So I still had to study for about a month, while I was working, which was pretty horrible. So I wouldn't recommend that. But, you know, it worked out. And, then applying, I worked like a second shift schedule, so I worked 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And so I just wake up and do a lot of my writing in the morning, and then, you know, also, you can also do some work at work, if you have some downtime. I did some of my writing during dinner breaks or, you know, coffee breaks. And, you know, you can find a way to make it happen. But I agree that it would have been late work during school. I don't think I had that sort of time.
All the people who like went straight through our classes, it's like,
I
wanna know, like, what was going on. I wanna like commend them, because
like you give up on your classes at that point. Like, I don't know how people do it.
They're very human for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a total pain. It's very, very hard. I don't know, but it's one of those things where like, yeah, it's very difficult, but so many people do it, so it must be a thing that you can do. I don't know, people are really good at doing hard things, even if it like makes them sad, so, you know, you can do it. It's, I don't know.
they like limit your time on the free.
Yeah, I know.
And,
That's how I'm
Reddit.
Listen,
Like go there, like that's, it
Oh,
was like, whatever yourself. Like sometimes people like have good tips. But then once you start seeing like the toxicity.
oh,
Yeah, just look for like the resources, the mnemonic, like,
so 5% tips, the rest is just like, oh, I got a perfect MCAT, will I get in somewhere?
yeah.
Yeah, you will.
My account was, no.
things are never as bad as they are on Reddit. Like I would like look at Reddit and spiral and like, I'm fine. Like if I put my stuff up there and like, hi, can I get into med school? Like someone would be like, no, like,
Yeah,
I was couple hours with like your whole like 12 hours of shadow. Right.
Also, people lie,
Yeah,
they lie aggressive.
I don't think I had 12 hours. of shadow.
Yeah. Oh, I get 10,000 hours sleep.
If you do want like a more structured, like, process into preparing your application, there are like SMPs, special master's programs that are phenomenal. They're really, really great, and a lot of people have a lot of success. So I would look into that if you don't wanna like figure it all out yourself, and would rather take a year and have somebody else figure it out, and it's costly, but it's costly for everybody.
I guess a cheaper option similar to that, part of my postdoc program at a community college, it was like part of their pre-health like sector of the community college. So I took like a 1-credit MCAT prep course where I met one-on-one with my teacher, and she gave me all the tips and tricks, which was great. And then there was like an MCAT or a med school application 1-credit prep course as well. They kind of walked you through it, and that was at community college, so it wasn't that expensive at all. So I don't know what the community colleges are like in the Atlanta area from Washington, but definitely check them out, see what they have to offer. Yeah, be a good resource.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. I think we're like at the end of our time, but like, I don't know, like if you guys have more questions, if you guys are like staying back in a couple minutes, if anybody has anything on. But of course, like y'all are free to go. Thank you for coming. Please remember to fill out the attendance form.
Great.
Thank you.
Stand up, stand up, stand up.
Stop. Yeah.